Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. The drama continues between Red Bull and McLaren. Zak Brown has made his thoughts very clear on Christian Horner and Max Verstappen and the Red Bull outfit over the last couple of months, and despite the fact that Mercedes won the last two races, they still remain, McLaren and Red Bull, the fastest two cars on the grid as per our current understanding. Therefore, we're expecting more battles over the coming races. Zak Brown says they will play fair, they want to go toe-to-toe with Red Bull, but they won't employ nasty tactics like this Red Bull outfit have. What is he getting at here? Is he trying to find some way around the reality that McLaren have bottled a fair few races over the last couple? Very much into your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. First of all, this is Adrian Newey driving not his new RB17, but actually an old school Niki Lauda Ferrari. Now he does talk about the fact that he was good friends with Niki, and he actually mentions that in this quote right about here, to drive Niki's old car, his championship winning car, driving of course at Goodwood this morning. So special really is, knew Niki quite well, so to be in here sitting in the same seat trying to think what he might have been experiencing and how he prepared himself for the start and everything is really special, he says. However, nonetheless, it is Adrian Newey inside of a Ferrari, right? So there has obviously been some discussion on this, whether there's anything to it. We saw the rumours yesterday that maybe this potential joining a Ferrari thing is not going to happen anymore, doesn't want to move to Italy or whatever it might entail, potentially going to Maranello, and the team is not exactly in the best spot as it presently stands. So then you've got the Aston Martin thing, then you've got the McLaren thing, maybe you've even got the Williams thing, but that I think is still a matter for debate. But anyway, he's inside a Niki Lauda Ferrari, so yeah, got to say there might be something in that. Couple of driver market pieces here as well. James Vowles reiterates that yes, he is open-minded to a potential mid-season swap at Williams. I think the intention for Mercedes is going to be, they think Antonelli's probably good enough to get that drive next year, but given the fact now that Mercedes are no longer a midfield team, really, because at the start of the season, Mercedes were, in total, Wolff described it himself, a rebuild phase. They are obviously falling off, they're trying to get back to the top. So Antonelli as a rookie makes a bit of sense in an outfit which is, fourth or fifth best. All of a sudden, if Mercedes think they can challenge for the championships next season, then maybe a rookie in the car starts to make somewhat less sense. So that's why there's been more talk about Carlos Sainz. Obviously, if Max is available, you get Max, but that's still a debate. So the Antonelli move may be, as a result, held off to some degree, and if that is true, then what does that mean for Williams? Because if, maybe Antonelli goes there next year for 1 year, but even there's been rumours that at Monza, certainly as soon as Antonelli's 18, although he's now allowed to drive even at 17, he could be in that Williams car, and James Vowles definitely does not rule that out. Speaking of Sainz, though, thought it was mentioning what the race had to say on the Sainz situation, basically saying that if Red Bull don't rate Perez anymore, they don't want to keep him, you've just got to swallow the fears on Sainz, right? Because we know that Sainz's father and Max Verstappen's father, they don't necessarily see so eye to eye, and certainly back when they were in the Toro Rosso days, it wasn't exactly ideal for the pair of them, but nonetheless, there is a world in which they will effectively have to be alongside each other if that makes the most sense of Red Bull, if they don't rate Perez enough, because it's not exactly clear there's anyone else in their stable Red Bull, either Lawson or Ricciardo, or they don't seem to rate Yuki enough, even though he's probably justified a drive in the main Red Bull team, to give him a drive. And therefore, is Sainz the best option available? And this is why Carlos is biding his time, because the Red Bull situation, the Mercedes situation, still in flux, rather than locking in with Alpine or Williams or Audi, as have been other options, right? And of course, Antonelli's victory in the sprint race in F2 at Silverstone this weekend, a very impressive one, definitely has turned the needle on that to some degree. Quickly on the Newey stuff as well, there was actually these comments from Aston Martin driver Fernando Alonso made, saying, look, the future is right now, like, he's obviously talking, he's preaching to the choir to some degree here, right? So, you're going to expect comments like this, but he does say, the future is bright, I'm super excited, we've got the best engineers and the best designers are coming to Aston Martin. So, look, we know that Enrico Cardile of Ferrari is going over there, but does Alonso know something we don't in terms of the Newey stuff, right? Is there something in that? Possibly, possibly not, especially when there was more rumours yesterday that there have been further conversations and meetings between Adrian Newey and Lawrence Stroll. So there's probably something in that. Time will tell exactly what that looks like, but as it stands, Newey is, the front-running team to sign Newey is Aston Martin. They've got the money, they've got the resources, they've got the pull. It would be a serious scalp to take. And to be fair, I thought for some time that if it wasn't Ferrari, Aston does maybe, they, in terms of the pull factors, they have a lot they can offer Newey, but to be fair, a lot of that maybe is monetary, and I don't know how much that moves the needle for Newey when he's probably got enough money, and wherever he goes, he's going to make enough to, sail around the world as much as he possibly wants after his retirement, whenever that's potentially going to be. But over the last few rounds, Mercedes have had a major resurgence, right? Going from, as I said at the start of the season, basically a midfield team, now to being a front-running team, winning the last 2 Grand Prix in a row. Sure, Austria was lucky with the collision up front, and we'll get into that in a second, because that seems to be what Zak Brown is talking about here. But then, of course, in Silverstone, it was pure pace from the Mercedes. They were 1-2, they were pulling away at the start of the race, and sure, as time progressed, the McLaren was quicker in certain conditions. Red Bull had the better strategy with Max Verstappen, but of course, it was not quite enough in the end. Ferrari, there's been some more discussion on exactly what's gone wrong there, why it's gone wrong, and exactly whether they can correct it. So, the race is saying that Ferrari's Barcelona upgrade potentially led to more high ride height downforce from the underfloor. So, I think what they were trying to do was improve some of the performance in the slower speed corners, and some of that was, let's say, okay, as the car goes faster, you generate more downforce from the floor so the car can kind of suck to the ground a little bit more, whereas when the corner's a bit slower, sure, you obviously set a ride height level, but if you're generating less downforce, you're running slightly higher to the ground. But even just in general high ride height settings for certain tracks, they were trying to generate more downforce, and they generally achieved that. The issue is, it's leading to some inconsistencies in the load with the ride. So there's a few problems that Ferrari have to get on top of here, and of course, to get on top of it now in year 3 of the regulations is far from ideal, and they've got to define a new development path. So again here, Ferrari find themselves at a bit of a crossroads, and it's fascinating how a couple of months ago it looked like Hamilton's decision to go to Ferrari was a nailed-on banger idea, and Mercedes were on the downwards, Ferrari were on the upwards. Now it seems like a very different story, but who knows, in 3 months' time, again, it might, things might have turned around again if Ferrari's attempted fixes to these problems actually work as intended, then maybe they're back on the warpath, but that right now seems kind of unlikely, although Haas maybe have something to teach Ferrari, because Ayaka Komatsu is really happy with how things are going over there. They're looking to cement themselves as a top 6 team. They've got more upgrades coming to the Haas as well after back-to-back top 6s for Nico Hülkenberg in the last couple of rounds. Incredible stuff. But as we say on those teams, Ferrari have gone downwards, and Mercedes still believe they're a bit off the pace. I mean, realistically, Silverstone, the conditions, the coolness of the day, the fact that Hamilton's an absolute monster around there, obviously, there were certain things that played into their favour. And to be fair, Mercedes go to Hungary next, a circuit where they've taken pole in probably like 9 of the last 11 Grand Prix, including for the last 2 years in a row with Russell in 22 and Hamilton in 23. Now, the results haven't gone their way the last couple of years, but nonetheless, it's still been a good track for them, Hungary, historically, and who knows if that's going to continue. But on average, Mercedes are still saying, we're probably a tenth and a half, a couple of tenths off the pace where we need to be, and that's where McLaren and Red Bull presently are, right? In the hands of Lando especially, and Max Verstappen obviously, they are the two to do battle every weekend, and that's what we saw back in Austria, right? They came together. There was lots of drama about this, not just from the drivers, but from the teams themselves as well. When you had Christian Horner talking about how Lando Norris was, trying to make something happen, and obviously the McLaren guys went into full PR defense mode. They even tweeted out on their official Twitter account that analysis from Anthony Davidson, talking about how Max was at fault, squeezed him, whatever, right? We know how that goes. And from a media point of view, I think McLaren thought, let's win the war somehow, use Lando's big popularity, use all the discussion about it to get some good PR points, but the reality is they lost points that day to Max Verstappen, and this is how it tends to go. And there's always a battle in this sport of, okay, are you going to play nice or are you going to play to win? And I think McLaren over the last few rounds are kind of finding that out to some degree, that a team like Red Bull doesn't really care what people think about them. They're interested in winning the races. And this is what McLaren maybe have to either realise or have an alternate approach, because as Zak Brown actually says, now we know that Zak Brown's been going pretty hard, right? He's called out Christian Horner on various things, says that, sometimes they're cheating, sometimes they're not cheating, sometimes they're over the line in various sporting or financial ways. Also said how Max Verstappen would not be winning the Grand Prix or not winning the championship, in any other car, and says there's 6 drivers that will win the championship in the Red Bull. Okay, maybe that's less true now than it was a few races ago, but whatever. Zak Brown's been talking his trash, right? I mean, as soon as McLaren were back at the front, immediately Zak Brown's on the warpath in terms of calling out Red Bull. So this is when we find the following quote. They seem to, at times, talking about Red Bull, have a win-at-all-costs mentality. That is not how we go racing. We think we can go toe-to-toe and take the fight to them in our own way. Now, this is a statement. I mean, he even says this. We're prepared to go toe-to-toe. Nasty is not how McLaren goes racing. I think you can go toe-to-toe. You don't have to be nasty about it. So kind of calling out like the way Max drives maybe, and also the way that the Red Bull team operates in general. I will say it's incredible to think though that Ron Dennis, of course, McLaren chief for many years, you know, he would have had the entirely opposite approach, right? For him, it was literally win at all costs. So McLaren has clearly changed under Zak Brown's helm over the last several years. But also, you know, is this the right mentality, right? Because if you're Red Bull, sure, they don't really care about getting trashed, but they're going to try and win. Whereas McLaren are saying, well, you know, we'll fight and we'll try and win, but if Red Bull and Max want to play dirty, we're not going to play dirty back type thing. But, you know, at the end of the day, when you've got a team as effective as Red Bull and a driver as effective as Max, they very rarely make any mistakes. And when you do have the possibility to, you know, twist the knife and get a good result against them, you've got to try and take advantage of it, and McLaren just haven't really done that right. And Zak Brown was talking about how in recent races, it's not like, oh my god, we're in the lead, it's business as usual. Although if you listen to the radio messages between Norris and his engineer, when Hamilton pits, when Verstappen pits, it definitely seemed like what they were trying to do was protect their own race rather than go for the win. And they were too focused, I think, on what Mercedes did with Hamilton, what Red Bull did with Max when they chose their tyre compound rather than going for the medium, which was the better tyre, and they did with Piastri in the end. So I think McLaren still have a bit to learn in terms of getting over the line in many of these races, but also the way they race wheel to wheel as well, and the way they take the fight to Red Bull on and off the track, assuming they still will be the two strongest cars on average when we get to the next few Grand Prix. Maybe Mercedes slightly further behind based on what they're talking about and what we saw in the races before Silverstone. Then there's a very good chance that this continues, right? But tweet your thoughts on that in the comment section below, because at the end of the day, McLaren have done really well lately, but they're still just not able to quite get the wins. I mean, they've scored 8 podiums now in a row, but only one of those has been a victory, right? Of course, in Miami for Lando Norris. Apart from that, it's been podiums, but not wins. And many of those opportunities were there for the taking, but they were not taken, right? And whether you think that's just an experience from the team, from the drivers, or whether it stems from the top-down perspective, because I think Zak Brown's argument here and criticism of Red Bull is arguably actually a benefit that Red Bull have, is that they do try and win at all costs. And guess what? They win a lot of the time. And surely that's kind of the point. As long as you're not cheating and breaking the rules, you're doing what you can do within the rules, but you know, that is usually how sports tend to work. So tweet your thoughts in the comments. Before we close out though, wanted to mention there's some very interesting things happening with Max Verstappen and the Red Bull camp here, because he was, well, firstly, he's going to have to take an engine penalty at some point in the near future as well. Probably at Spa they'll do it, just because his engine, I think in Canada, which conked out, was not able to be recovered. But you guys will of course remember this incident from Silverstone 2021, Hamilton into Verstappen, and Verstappen out of the race, 51 impact on the outside of Cops, and you know, taken to the hospital for checkups. Thankfully it was okay. However, in hindsight, maybe Max wasn't so okay, because Max actually says ever since Silverstone 2021, now I believe that it seems to have resolved itself now. I don't think this is a problem to the present day, but certainly from then to the end of the season, it does seem like there's something in this, right? So Max says, since Silverstone 21, I've struggled with visibility problems for a few laps at the US Grand Prix in Austin, which of course he won. It was an absolute titanic battle between him and Hamilton. They were toe-to-toe to the end of the race. Everyone was left in the dust in their wake, effectively, that Grand Prix. He said it was so bad, I seriously considered turning off the car. So, yeah, basically saying that after he had that massive crash, he wasn't fully race fit in some ways. Like, he's talking about how on undulating circuits or those with advertising boards at the side of the track, you know, he was racing against Lewis and against the blurred images he was seeing in his eyes. I was driving, it's like driving a speedboat at 300 miles an hour. I never said this before, it was so bad I considered turning off the car. And the only thing that helped was to concentrate on my breathing, with Lewis breathing down my neck. Obviously a massive win at the time. So it raises a couple of questions really, because if Max was experiencing these issues, but yet he was declared race fit by the FIA, right? This is the arguments that people are making, is that, hang on a second here, Max is effectively saying that he was suffering with symptoms of concussion, I guess you could argue, over those few races. after, basically from Silverstone to the end of the season. Maybe it explains some of the questionable decision making in Jeddah, or, whatever you want to say that year. But, he was clearly not fully race fit. I don't know. I mean, he was obviously able to race well and win, but he's literally admitting in hindsight that, yeah, like he was in a rough spot and he wasn't able to race as he would have liked. But, clearly the FIA declared him fit to race again. So either the FIA were thinking, okay, we've got to allow him to race because, the championship fight, or Max and Red Bull thought that themselves. They thought, I can't possibly have Max like pull out because of this. He's got to race anyway. We'll just see what happens. So definitely raises some interesting questions there in hindsight. And just one final thing I thought was kind of interesting here. So bit of drama on this as always. Tomo came out with his mid-season report ranking the drivers on his own picks and then the picks of the audience that all voted. Perez got last, Verstappen got first, Hülkenberg second on both counts. Pretty interesting list. You can definitely debate the merits of some of this. The position of Russell and Sainz, for example, the fact that Piastri is quite high, actually tied exactly with Russell in the voter scores. So, Leclerc down in 9th, Albon 10th, Gasly, Alonso, who has not been, as good as maybe expected so far this season, Ricciardo, Bottas and Magnussen very close, and then Sargent, Zhou and Perez not with the best scores. So, obviously some debate between what Tomo had, what the audience had, and, Piastri has probably been kind of unlucky in certain instances this year, so I kind of get it. But, Hülkenberg being second best this season in many's estimation is actually really, really cool to think about. But very much interested your thoughts in the comments below, and also raises questions whether he could be, or maybe should have been, a good partner to Max Verstappen instead of Perez over these last couple of years. But hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.